You're starting,
Oh,
right?
it's me.
That's
Oh
it.
my God, okay.
That's staying in.
Okay. Welcome to You Can't Be Pretty and Smart. Well, at least not at the same time. We're your hosts, Zacchary Powell and John Zambarano.
Truly, today we are choosing pretty. Today we will be diving into part 2 of our discussion of Mars and Rāhu, the concept of deception in astrology, and the role of the villains and villainization in the lives and depictions of queer and other marginalized people.
Part 1, we focused on Serena Williams and the show Traitors, where we looked at the expression of Mars-Rāhu placements in the charts and experiences of Serena throughout her life, and the drag queen Peppermint during her short time on Traitors.
And here in part 2, we will discuss the Olympics, specifically Simone Biles and our queen Beyoncé, looking at the ways in which these two Mars-Rāhu divas have seemed to find success in not simply going after their goals, but in letting go.
In other words, this episode will focus on remediation of Mars and these deceptive placements of Mars and Rāhu. What can one do to deal with the difficulties of these transits, as well as when you have them in your chart? And how can we rise above and triumph over the difficulties of life? John, it's been some time. We've been away for a month. What's been going on? Why have we been gone for a month?
So, in like greater astrological context, 2020, very cardinal year. 2021 into 2022, the cardinal stayed, but the fixed also got shaken up.
Yeah.
Now we have reached mutable time finally. And
we sure have.
I get what y'all have been experiencing. Like, holy shit. Like, it's
too much
for the both of us. And like, everyone closest to me is mutable ascendant for the most part. And it's just like it's not cute.
It's not it. I mean, in my, I posted on my Instagram stories, I was like, I'm not well. And I described this and like, I just like honestly talked about it. And the amount of engagement I got, the number of people who were like, oh my gosh, I'm experiencing the same thing. Like I talked about how, like one thing that I experienced is having like, that I've worked so hard on with my anxiety has been the physical experience, the physical symptoms of like basically what for me it is like radiating energy through my body. Like it just like feels, I can almost feel the blood moving through my veins. That's like how overstimulated it feels. And it came back. It's been gone for a while and it came back. And I described that and someone was like, oh my gosh, this is what's happening to me. And it's the first time it's ever happened. And we were able to discuss like how it's like the things that have been helped and things that haven't, things that were just, like basically sometimes you just have to, with difficult Mars things, you sometimes just have to like get to the other side. Like there is not always a solution. Yeah. There's just like a perseverance through it.
Especially,
like that's the solution,
Especially Mars in a diurnal sign.
Yeah.
You just gotta,
yes.
There's not like a break option.
No,
like Mars in the nocturnal signs and the water signs. Sometimes there's like
that's such a good point.
There's like a moment of pause or like a not as ferocious. It's the word that's coming to me. Kind of like movement, but like Mars in any of the fire or air signs, you are just like the flame is burning, and you just have to you have to feed it. There's no letting that lapse ever.
And Kelly Surtees talks about this, where like when Mars is ever in an air sign, there's always mental. Well, she doesn't say mentee bee.
She goes mentee bee.
There's always mental problems. There's always the mentee bees. No, but she talks about like there being a mental disturbance, like always. Like, and I think that's always been true, regardless of the sign. Sometimes it's worse in Libra, perhaps, but it is pretty difficult. And I think and you and I were texting about this when we were like in the thick of it, but like. We thought that Jupiter would be helpful, and I think it was just hopeful. Like I was extra hopeful that would be true.
For me,
I think Jupiter.
Keep going.
What? Okay, because I think because Jupiter, because Jupiter is in detriment, right, and like overwhelmed himself. He caused the overwhelm. He made Mars's condition worse. Right? Like he revved Mars up and like that, like, and again, we have the square from Saturn that makes it that much. So like we have basically the Mars-Saturn square that is just about struggle. Like that's literally its signification regardless of sign. It's just like, like there is just like a start and stop, start and stop, start and stop. Like there is just constant. Then we find it to be immutable signs, and it's like, okay, everything's changing, everything. And then we're in an air sign that's ruled by Mercury, and it's super overwhelming. And you add Jupiter, and he only adds gas to the fire, right? And so, and yet we cannot move forward with Saturn squaring it. You cannot move forward.
And the ruler of the sign is also retrograde. Like
retrograde.
To add like the icing on the shit cake that was going on, like these planets were looking to a ruler that was literally like like every time I think about personifying Mercury as Mercury retrograde, he is literally like and it's just like I don't give up, especially Mercury dignity. Like when it was, I think it got less bad when Mercury moved into Leo, if I'm being completely honest.
Yes, it did.
But like Mercury,
I think it's also because the Mars square moved and the square was to Saturn.
He's no longer, yes, he's not involved as much with the malefics, but just like, holy fuck. Like I feel like I was able to be like, and it like, I was like, oh my God, like there really finally is an ending. For me, the whole, with the Jupiter, I think it added the sense of like delusional positivity where I was just like,
sure. I guess we're just doing it.
We're riding the ride. Like I paid for this, I guess. Like what the fuck?
Someone paid for this.
Someone.
It may not have been me.
I didn't ask to be born, Mom.
You know, yeah, it's been a time. It's been a time. And I think, you know, one key thing that we've been talking about, and I think what is interesting when you are doing spiritual work, for better or for worse, you experience certain things sometimes that are perhaps louder than you would normally be based on your chart or based on, you know, like because you are the person that is going to be disseminating a message to someone else.
Because you're you're the conduit.
Yes. And so I think we're not the only ones. This happens to many people, but like,
no,
because we have
just us.
We're special.
Nobody else.
But like, there's a certain level of like experiencing the difficulty kind of full on as a way for us to experience the fullness of the difficulty so that we are able to discuss it properly and also discuss how to help and like provide solace, both remediate, like through remediation or through devotional practices or through whatever. We're able to provide that information to other people. Like there was just like moments when I would have such extreme anxiety, and then I talked to you about this, but like I remembered all of a sudden out of nowhere, I remembered the Mars mantra that I started using in the beginning of my Mars practice, and I was walking, and I literally it wouldn't stop. And it was just radiating, like, I mean, raging through my body. Pulsing. And pulsing, genuinely pulsing. And I like was walking home from work, and I was to my new apartment that I had like just moved into. And I was just like, and I was like, what is going, like, I need this to stop. It was so painful, right? Like emotionally mostly, but like also physically very deeply uncomfortable. Like I needed it to stop. And I remembered the mantra, and I like immediately found it so quickly, and I started playing it, and I started like harmonizing to it, and immediately the symptoms went away. And I was like,
girl,
got it. I'm supposed to note this for when we talk about it on the podcast, right? Oh, yeah, like I was like, I could feel, I know it's weird to say that. Like, I don't mean to say like, I don't know, somehow special or whatever, but like there was a clear clear message that I got when that happened that like was like, so now you need to talk about it. Like this is a thing, so please talk about it now, because it was so immediate, and I have no idea about the cosmology of how mantras or why mantras work, but it worked so immediately.
Well.
Yeah, and like. It didn't require, you know, like so many times people talk about mantras, and they're talking about like, you know, when you're going through a really difficult transit that's kind of like long, and you're sitting down and you're doing it 108 times. That's at least what I've heard most of it for mantras. I could recite this particular Mars mantra 5 times, done.
And
I could just like, to get through the moment, I would recite it and then keep going, right? And like, it was so powerful. And I just think like there's a certain level of like us experiencing this like strong difficulty as a way to be able to discuss it. I guess is my point.
Something that was coming to me as you were talking about that was that, as someone who's done mantras for like, as also you have like multiple planets, the Mars ones always just seem to work like almost like quicker than all the other ones. And that could have to, that maybe has to do with like, we both have Mars in angular houses, so it could be that. But like,
Sure.
I have found in my experience also, like, my Mars is not doing amazing in my chart. Right. It's like MKS among other things. And so like having something be so blatantly wrong and like taking a single step to correct it, you're like, holy shit. I don't know if it, I don't know if it is going to the like severity of the afflicted, the severity of the affliction, or to the nature of Mars being what we associate to be like very active and very like movement oriented.
Yeah.
So if you're listening and you've done a Mars mantra, like I'm actually very curious to know if that mantra effect has felt more immediate to you than other planets. Because like doing stuff for my moon feels like it takes
a long time. Saturn, there's like almost, I've done a Saturn one, and it like there's a need for consistency and like length, right? In order to get you get the remediation, certainly. But Saturn, I've really noticed, because I did a Saturn mantra during my Saturn return. The beginning of it, when it was like the exact hit, I fell off with it at the end, and really should have kept with it, honestly, based on how much I went through toward the end of it. But that beginning part, like it was really a period of like sitting there and doing the full 108. Mm-hmm. And it was like, I dedicated myself. It was super Saturnian in that regard. And like really giving myself over to that practice. And it was very helpful in that. And, I think what's really funny sometimes about mantras specifically is like, sometimes they work, or actually, honestly, remediation in general. The best case scenario sometimes for remediation is that nothing happens. Absolutely nothing. You like do the thing, nothing happens. And you're like, great, that's exactly what I needed, because the alternative was my life crashing around.
The alternative was me seppuku. Like that was option number 2.
Not that. And also, so like we recorded our first part just before the Olympics. And so one person that we really wanted to talk about was Simone Biles in our last episode. And it was interesting that like, we did talk about her a little bit, but we're like, there's something to notice, I think, a bit more now post Olympics. And like her complete domination, but not like, oh gosh. Okay. There's 2 things: complete domination while also being completely satisfied that she didn't dominate in other areas. And I know we're going to like dive into it, but it's just like, it's so resonant of like, I think what we've talked about with regard to like how to remediate this Mars-Rāhu placement in your chart, or like having these difficult Mars or Rahu transits, is like learning to like power through in the moment that it's meant to. And then when it's not working, literally just letting go. Because Mars-Rāhu will make you want to keep the fuck going, like to the point of you literally no longer existing. But the lesson seems to be finding the moments to drive after, and also finding the moments to let go. And it was so clear. Like when she did the individual vault, the individual, whatever, the medal for the individual vault, not the team final, but her individual final. I mean, she was wearing red, and she did the hardest vault in the world, and just was like, nailed it. And you're like, what? Like, it was beautiful. It was so powerful. And then on beam, she fell on beam, and so did Suni Lee. It was just like that fascinating. Like, there was just like a give and take, but she's still the most decorated gymnast at the Olympics of all time.
Because she's that girl.
Like, yep. Because she's that girl. And it's so beautiful to like watch, like have, like that new Simone Biles documentary that we started talking about in the last part. Seeing her progression of like learning to come back into the practice of doing gymnastics, and like sometimes coming some days, but not coming other days. Sometimes like just letting her body, like letting herself know when she was okay, was just so beautiful to watch. and be like, this is exactly how you deal with difficult Mars. Because at the end of the day, Mars-Rāhu is an affliction of Mars. Like, it is a deeply difficult Mars placement that you have to deal with. And I've noticed that like planets where in your chart that are difficult, that are like, whether it's like based on dignity, whether it's based on being with a node that it doesn't want to be with, like, you know, Venus with Rahu is like not as difficult, and what is it, Saturn with K2 is the other one that's not like the absolute
Saturn.
Worst.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And Jupiter K2 is also pretty good.
Oh, okay. So, but like, but other than the, you know, like that, like definitely Mars-Rāhu is an afflict. Like that's
Mars.
Like,
yeah, Mars.
difficult.
It's if I had, not that I'm like ranking difficult combinations sure. here, but like Mars, and if we're putting two planets together that are that would be in the running for me to say that that is one of the hardest combinations of two planets to have together. Yeah. Unless like there's some massive mitigating condition.
Yes, right.
Like absolutely not. And when we think about the idea of like persevering and doing everything that you have to do, but also the kind of necessity of the like, I mean, this is, I think, foreshadowing to like the remediation part, which is I think what we're doing the whole time.
We're basically talking about it. Yeah.
Like there is you have to lean into like the lunar, the rest. Like it is now time to like let go. It's time to break free. I'm working late because I'm a singer. Ooh. Her new album was fine. When we think about, it was fine. It wasn't amazing. It was fine.
Anyway, back to
I'm really thinking about Beyonce and this idea of for so fucking long.
Yes,
this has to do with the placement of her nodes. It's actually very like Rahu important for her, and this like her having Rahu in the 10th, and like she has done so much for so long that now she's really is just like,
well, yeah,
I'm going to do things at my speed, really.
Yes. I mean, and even like in her Renaissance film, like the film of the tour.
Yeah.
It was, there was a moment, and I wish I had the direct quote, but she basically says, for so long I was going so hard. And like I would practice until I could feel the choreography in my body, and I knew I could never mess up. But she's like, but this time I'm just sitting in it. Like I'm not required. I just know that I'm the best. I don't know if she says the best, but she says something similar to like acknowledging how good she is.
Like she's like, I know that I've done what I've done. Like my body of work at this point speaks for itself. Is really like it's kind of like the point that she's making. Really.
Yes.
It's and like I'm Beyonce. Like I can calm down.
I can calm down. She's like, I no longer have to prove myself anymore. Prove myself anymore to people or to myself or to anything. And it's like, and if you want, I mean, if you know, to go back to that tour, that summer tour, which was massive, huge. She was so calm. She was having so much fun. My favorite videos on TikTok of her was the part when she would just like break into dance and laughter with her like there was just like there was a release, there was a full release of what had previously been such a Mars-Rāhu career of constant nonstop perfection. And then I was like, go.
I was just, this is all connected. So in her chart, when you look at her chart, in her Vedic chart, she has what's known as a Kala.
Oh, speaking of which, we should just mention.
The chart that we're using has 11.
Beyonce is a Scorpio rising, a tropical Scorpio rising ruled by Mars and Rahu.
In Leo. Absolutely.
She is not a Libra rising with Venus on the ascendant. You can fight someone else on that.
She's a Vedic Libra rising. So you bitches are right about that when you say she's Libra rising.
But where is that Venus? That Venus is in Virgo as well. It's in the 12th. Which is exactly makes sense. Anyway, keep going.
Her Kala, she has Kala Amrita, which is when you have you have Kala Sarpa or Kala Amrita. Kala Sarpa is when, if you look zodiacal order, K2 is the furthest zodiacally, whereas Kala Sarpa is Rahu is the furthest zodiacally. So all 7 signs, including Rahu and K2, those are the signs that are occupied by the planets. She has that, and hers starts with Rahu in the 10th and ends in K2 in the 4th, and so it's an angular yoga for her. When I think about Kala Sarpa and you think, or Kala Amrita or either of them, the 40s become really important because Rahu matures at the age of 42 and Ketu matures at the age of 48. And that's when your Kala Sarpa is considered to be like unlocked. There's this feeling of like binding. It's like think of literally like a serpent is like coiled around you until, if you have Kala Amrita, it's 48, which is the one she has. If you have Kala Sarpa, where Rahu leads, it's 42. But for Kala Amrita, the 42, it's like when it starts to unlock, and then 48 is when you finally get that like release. Whereas with Kala Sarpa, it just like 42, it kind of like breaks kind of immediately. Why? Because Rahu's the problem.
Because Rahu's the problem. Yes.
And she has that Mars-Rāhu in the 10th. So this like literal like
release,
8-year like unbinding process that she is going through that will culminate when she is 48 in 2029 is like is beginning, and like you could actually see, like you could see her shed that layer.
See it
where she is like, I'm having fun now, like I'm here.
I mean, she literally just came out with a fucking whiskey. Okay, also, sorry, just an aside, but like also obviously related. Have you seen the photos of her, like for her launch of that?
I didn't even know that she did that.
So it's called Sir Davis. It's named after her great grandfather, I want to say, please fact check that. Who was a bootlegger and made whiskey, he was a moonshiner, even better, moonshiner. And she named it after him because when, maybe it was her grandfather. Maybe it was her grandfather, because great-grandfather potentially would be too old, but I don't know. But because she particularly has said that she had
paternal great-grandfather, a farmer and moonshiner in the American South during Prohibition.
It was either her mother or her had mentioned that when she went to go see him once, I think it was her mother, or oh my God, whatever. There's a story about essentially the reason she called it Sir Davis is because of the fact that it was the first time that a Black person had heard other people call a Black person Sir. So people in her family, whether it was her or someone else, I think it was her. I'm thinking he has to be like, that would mean he's so old, if he's like somewhat young, or he was alive when she was alive. But regardless. So anyway, that's the reason why it's called Sir Davis, is because like he was called Sir Davis. And it's named after this ancestor. And she's literally, for the launch for the videos, she's in clothing that is very reminiscent of what you would wear in ritual. Literally in ritual. It is like all white, and it is beautiful, and there's a headdress. There's a headdress that like flows down, and there's literally cowrie shells on her ears and on the shoes. And I was like, Mama, this magic is loud. And like the way that she's coming out with she came out with a whiskey that is $90, mind you.
I just checked. I was gorgeous. Like, it's $90.
$90. It is gorgeous. The bottle is beautiful. The glass is either they did it with LVMH, so it is like they have a Louis Vuitton box that you can open up. Like, I mean, that's like probably $1 bajillion, but like it has all these glasses and all that thing. And then she also obviously came out with this hairline. And so there's like this release also, not only of like, I need to be the best at my craft, but like now I can be all of these things. I can create an empire. Right? Like being released that. And I remember when I first talked about Beyoncé being a Scorpio rising, and we looked at like why she was, and we were looking at specifically where her lot of spirit would be. And when you look at her lot of spirit in the peak periods, for saying that she's a Libra rising, it's in Leo, the spirit, lot of spirit. And if we say she's a Scorpio rising and fully further into Scorpio rising, where I think she a little bit further into Scorpio rising, the lot of spirit moves into Virgo. And if it's in Leo, her peak period essentially would be Destiny's Child. That would be her level 1 peak. And if she's in Virgo, her level 1 peak would be starting in 2020. And I was like, we made this episode in 2021. And we were like, how could she get any bigger? And then she did. Like, and then she immediately did.
Somehow she did.
Like, nevertheless, she persisted, Mama. Like, that was, I mean, wow, like huge. I mean, I just love that visualization too, like of what you're talking about, like being bound or wrapped up in a serpent, and then slowly being released from its grip. And like this, like, you can literally see it in, like, she doesn't share much with us, but what she does share, she does seem to be released at this point, which is, or is being in the act of being released to her greatest potential, which I just think is really cool to see, because a key part of what we're trying to talk about with Simone Biles and with Beyoncé are that they started out in this like perfectionist mindset, in this like deep Mars-Rāhu drive, and have found themselves sitting back and allowing themselves to be great. Not perfect, but great. Great nonetheless, right? Like, Simone is still the greatest, like, most decorated gymnast of all time.
Mm-hmm.
Like, that's still true, right? Like, and like Beyonce is, I mean, so famous in a way that is just wild, and her music and what she's creating has just gotten better and better and better and more creative. And honestly, I think these like launches, like they like like some people, like Blake Lively. Sorry, she's been terrible, but
we don't love.
We don't love. No, did we not hear about what's been going on with Blake Lively?
With Miss Lively? No.
Miss Lively? Okay, well, she's been coming out. She came out with a movie. She did a movie. And this is, I'm sorry, we're doing so many asides, but who cares? Blake Lively is doing a movie. Look up what the name is. I can't remember what the name is. It's something. It's of a book. Basically, it's a remake of the book. And when the author came out with the book, it was very popular. But it ends
with us.
It ends with us, yes. It is a book.
Okay.
And I'm not going to describe any of the things, so this is not a trigger warning, but it does mention it is about domestic violence.
It's about TV, okay.
Yes. And so we're not going to go into any more details, just so you know. But but that's what the story is about. Like, and literally finding love after it. And so the author, when she came out with the book originally, super popular, and then she like came out with a coloring book as if it was like a girly book, like a romance novel, like a girly little romance novel book. Came out with a coloring book about a book about DV. Then, now that they've made the movie, Blake Lively tried to make it like, go see it with your girls, get dressed up, have some drinks, have some same, literally the same. I want to see what the chart of that book being launched is, because if you have the author had the same problem as the actress who's the lead for the movie adaptation, the same problem existed twice. That's crazy to me, especially considering you saw it happen once. You can make sure it doesn't happen again. But yeah, so she tried to make light of a movie about DD.
Girl.
But anyway, Blake Lively came out with a hair care line, right? And I was like, oh God. I mean, did some trend forecaster decide that hair care lines are now like what needs to happen? Did like all of a sudden, like Tracy Ellis Ross was like one of the first to do, I think one of the first, if not the first, to do it with pattern, and it's a really, really great product.
Yeah.
And then, obviously Rihanna did her Fenty Beauty line. Then
where's Fenty music? Also, where's Fenty music? Bring back Fenty music. That's all I'm gonna say.
Anyway, Fenty Beauty came out first, right, with the makeup. That's a makeup thing, obviously. Then Tracy Ellis Ross came out with pattern. Then Beyonce came out with Sacred, which is a hair care line. And then Rihanna came out with Fenty hair. And I was like, oh, come on. Mm-hmm. Come on. And then Blake Lively came out with this, and I was like, oh, so the white woman wanted to do something that all the black women did. Is that what it was? She was like, I want my own money. And it's like,
she's like, I need my, oh my God, this is so annoying. And there was this book came out the day Mars moved from Scorpio into Sag. So, but like 29 degrees, August 2nd, 2016.
2016. Mm-hmm. So almost like 8 years later.
Yeah, I mean, it's the
same mistake
over
again.
It's the Saturn square of this book.
Yeah. Like, it's so dumb. It was whatever. Anyway, that's not the point. The point is that I'm saying that the essentially, like, Beyonce's one, like Sacred, had a story, had a real narrative. It was genuine what she was creating because she grew up in her mother's salons. Mm-hmm. And this creation of this whiskey is like, she loves the whiskey. And she was talking about her relationship to whiskey is her relationship between what the two like the for her relationship between masculinity, feeling both masculine and feminine. And I was like, oh, you mean like being very martial and everyone seeing you as deeply Venusian? Interesting. And like how she like wrestles with that, and like and whiskey is something that she deeply enjoys, and it is also part of her like ancestry. There's a deep authentic. While I'm not like standing, and I don't stand people, right? Because everybody's a human. We don't need to like stand everyone. But you know, and I obviously don't know Beyonce personally, but I think what's really interesting about what she does now. I'm getting so many promises, but I think what's really interesting about what she's doing now is that she's like deeply authentic. She's not really performing a person anymore.
She's shedding the skin. Like she's shedding the layer of skin that's unnecessary at this point. She's like, I've built this up and now I can just, it had to be done. It had like Mars-Rāhu, it had to be done. Like I'm a Black woman in a still not very, previously very not accepting and approving of Black people.
Yes.
And now she's like, and look what I did. It had to get done, and I'm here.
And the difference of the success too, like yes, she had global success with Destiny's Child, and she had global success with her first few albums, I mean, it's really started with her self-titled album, Beyoncé, right? The one that dropped, you know, at midnight on a Friday, and then all of a sudden, music releases went from releasing on what day? Mars Day on Tuesdays, to switching to Fridays, which is interesting. Just a little tidbit, just a little piece of information that Beyonce did. But like that when it started, all of a sudden her creativity blew up.
But I like remember that's because that was like right around when I don't know. Yeah, I was in the 10th grade, maybe 9th grade.
Oh God.
But everyone was like, no, I know, but everyone was like just getting Spotify. That was like my age.
Yes,
we had like new into high school.
Sure.
And I remember like waiting for music, and then I was like, oh, why are you dropping an album out like when nobody's going to hear it? Because I saw it the next morning when I woke up because I was 16, whatever.
Yeah.
And I was like, why are you doing this? And then now, literally, I'm up on my phone Thursday nights waiting for music. Like when Brat came out, I was like, okay, I'm staying up till midnight because I want to hear this release. So like, she literally changed
the music industry.
Changed the music industry with doing that. It's fucking. It was like it was like such a conscious like, oh my God, this is crazy that this album did this.
And what else did she do with that album? She made a music video for every single song.
It's like she's so kind. But
no, but like that was also different. Like that was a new thing. And then after that, she created visual albums. Like, and you're like the creativity. She is just like she has been ever since I think 2013 has been unraveling into the person. And like Lemonade like took it to the next level. And then Renaissance and Cowboy Carter are just. I mean, she's only getting bigger. And
then also the K-pop album that she's in the middle of making. It's gonna be stellar.
There's literally no way. It has to be rock. 100% she has to be rock and roll.
She's gonna collab with like Blue Jeans and Twice and like Blackpink, and it's gonna be a K-pop. K-pop album.
There's no way.
I swear it's going to be a K-pop album.
I thought you were kidding.
I am.
Okay, that's what I'm saying. I'm like, there's no way. It wouldn't even make any sense thematically. Whatever. You're so rude. Anyway. What we're trying to talk about is two, Mars-Rāhu girlies who are slaying the day away with these hot deals. And you know, like, and I just think it's really interesting how, I don't know how it's like sometimes, you know, yes, I do believe that Beyonce is doing like spiritual and magical work, which I think is just so beautiful, and I think that's why she's had that experience so loudly and so profoundly that you can visually see it.
She's not hiding it. I mean, like she is. She's not. The normies, yeah, sure, they probably don't know. But like,
no, but she's dressing. She's like literally dressing like Oshun, like on stage. She is in that tradition. Actually, she is becoming Oshun. She is Oshun on the stage. Yeah. So whatever. Anyway, but like, I mean, it's really obvious. It's really loud. It's really. I mean, and the thing about it is that it's so effective in bringing about what she's needed to really unravel sounds bad, to loosen, to have the serpent unravel and find her way through it. And so Oh, sorry.
Also, the idea of when you look at her tropical chart, it's Mars Rahu in Leo in the 10th, and the idea of needing to embody this like solar figure to like really.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Because it's golden and yellow, and yes, I see what you're saying.
There's like her Lord of the 10th is like, okay, let me her fallen Lord of the 10th, really. Or no, sorry, not her fallen, her Lord of the 10th in Virgo is like, okay, it's time to get out of the earth and up into like these solar areas.
Yeah.
It's just she's a Scorpio rising anyway at the end of the day.
I know, she absolutely is.
That's what matters.
But and also, the way that Simone Biles has done it is through therapy and through genuinely and so what I was saying was basically what I was leading to is the idea that like it's so interesting, regardless of Beyoncé doing it actually magically, it's interesting how people end up remediating things somewhat naturally as a way to like, because it's part of survival. Like we end up doing remediation on purpose because we're like, well, we can't sustain this anymore. I have to try something different. Right? For Simone Biles, it was like, hey, I can't do gymnastics anymore. Like this is literally, I can't physically do it because the trauma in my brain is like not addressed. I have to address the trauma.
My mercurial ruled Mars conjunction is actually all about like my nervous system and needing to regulate that. Thank you.
Yeah. And she had to do that. She had to go to therapy. She had to get these tools. She had to address the problem. And I think that's the different, as we move into this discussion of like, more directly about remediation, it is super with Mars remediation. Sometimes it is like, hey, I know we've been avoiding this, but now we can't. We can know like there's a certain part of Mars remediation that is like, we have to come face to face with the foe.
The only way around it is to actually do it.
Yes, you cannot try to like avoid it or go around it. And there are ways, right? Like you can engage with Venus to like soften things. You can engage with Jupiter to like have hope in like things succeeding. You can engage with the moon to be able to rest and get all of that. And I think the moon is probably the most effective. But there is still a need at the end of the day. Mars is presenting a problem, and that problem does have to be addressed. You can push it. You can push it back. The moment that you need to address it, you can push it away a little bit longer. But at the end of the day, you're going to get to a point where it can no longer be ignored, and you have to come face to face with it.
This feels like a good time to bring this up. I was having a conversation on Twitter. I don't know if you saw it with Neha about remediation. It was really good. And I actually I like bookmarked my own tweet because I was like, I need to talk about this on the podcast. Let me find the tweet and let me just like read what it said before I misquote her. Replies. This was not long ago.
Okay, pause. My phone is running out of battery for no reason, and I don't know. So I'm just pausing here. It's supposed to be charging, and I don't understand why it's not. Cord. I need a new cord. Is it charging now? Yes. Okay. Great.
So Neha tweeted that the tweet was solar remediation, let go of trying to be relatable. Which I was like,
oh, I do remember. Yes, I do remember.
And I said, I love this take because it sounds super like Rahu to me, to let this idea of like letting go of being relatable. And I said, I like the idea of leaning into a different planet that maybe doesn't like almost get along with the planet that you're trying to remediate. And she was like, oh, can you expand on that? I'm so curious. And I was like, yeah, so like, well, Rahu, first of all, is like the weird planet. He's the only one without a body. He's the only one that like is always retrograde. He's also the ruler of Aquarius or co-ruler of Aquarius. And then I was like, I could go on a tangent about modern astrology, you taking the Rahu meaning and applying it to Aquarius. And that's why Aquarius is like the weird sign. Yeah. But also like, when you think about the remediation, like if the sun is like too overwhelming for you, what I would do, well, I mean, there's two ways that you could do this, right? You can directly try to like temper the sun.
Yes.
Or we go into what is the opposite of the sun. And when I think what is the opposite of the sun, I think Saturn, because that's where
Yeah.
he is detriment.
Yeah.
I think Venus, because that's where he has his fall. And I think Rahu, because of also the detriment and also the nodes literally eclipsing the lights, right? And so I was like, this idea of if the sun is too loud.
Sorry, I was thinking, I'm like, going to Rahu to address solar problems feels very scary. I don't know that I would ever want to do that, but I mean, yeah, sure. Technically, yes, that makes sense.
I'm not like strengthening Rahu by any means, right?
Sure.
A form of Rahu, like absolutely, sure, like why not? Let me go towards a less aggressive form of the least aggressive form of Rahu.
It would still be a choice. It would still be like a
yes, and
it's not the most delicate choice. Sorry.
I would probably go to Saturn at the end of the day. I would go to Saturn to like oppose the sun.
Yes.
But yeah, this idea of remediation either being like, let's work with the planet or let's work with the opposite or a very extremely different energy to kind of combat in a not aggressive way though, to like just shift the energy from that planet onto something else. Like if a planet is too overwhelming for you.
Yeah.
If Mars is too overwhelming, go to Venus or the moon. Like,
well, right. And I think too, like sometimes too, and this is like a key thing with devotional practices and like what one has to be like somewhat weary of is like, if you go to a planet and like me, for example, I went to Saturn and like, I have gone to Saturn twice in my devotional practices. First time I did it, it was just like very low key, very subtle, very demure, very mindful.
Very mindful.
Not very cutesy. So
not very demutesy.
Not literally not at all. So it was essentially I did it and it was very, very, very subtle. But for a month, basically, I did it. And I didn't do it very often, but I had an altar, like a very mini, small altar that was just like, here this is. And just having the altar itself made it hard for me to do almost anything. And I used to be like an experienced multitasker. Like I could do 17 million things at once. Hashtag Gemini rising with Mars in the first. I could do so much, right? Like I just knew how to do it. But at that time, especially, but like it made me, this practice made me so fearful and like unable to do it in my brain. It just took over my brain in a way that like made me feel so uninspired and made me feel very sullen. So I felt like I couldn't actually achieve it. And I remember the moment that I like realized it was because the Saturn altar literally just existed. And I was like, oh, and I like respectfully took it down and I just like prayed to Saturn and I was like, hey girl, I don't know.
This was enough.
And I did it during Saturn hour and at the end of Saturn hour, and it was Jupiter night. I think it was moving into Jupiter night. And I went to go to the wine store and like bought a bottle of wine, walked out of the wine store. And I realized that on my trip from my apartment to the wine store and leaving the wine store, I had done 5 different tasks that I needed to get done in the middle of it just because it popped into my head. And I was like, oh yeah, I can do that. Oh yeah, I can do that. Whereas before it literally made me feel like I could barely do one thing and I really had to work really hard. So sometimes going directly to the planet is just not for you. It is just not for you, especially perhaps in the beginning of your practices, in the beginning of figuring out what these kinds of things are. Some planets are just not for us. And so going to them to get that kind of their type of energy or to like solve a certain problem that they're causing for you, sometimes that's just not the way. Going to them and asking them for help, they might say, hey girl, I'm going to require too much from you. Yeah, fuck you, first of all. Second of all, I'm going to require an insane initiation. And you're going to have to get through that before I'm ever going to help you. And like, that's not always doable. You might not be able to get to the other side of their initiation. And that's not like, you don't need to deal with that. So sometimes, yeah, I guess I'm bolstering your point, or I'm agreeing with you and validating your point that like sometimes it's just, you can't, like, it's too much to go to that planet. You need to solve it in a different way. And these are like, the ways that kind of to remediate are those direct ways, those intermediary ways. And also, like there's things like planetary charity. Austin Coppock talked about love planetary charity. And I think that's a great way to not have to engage with the planet directly and still get the benefit of them backing off. Which essentially, to explain, lightly what planetary charity is, and I would love to hear your thoughts, I think, from a Vedic perspective too. But the essential idea is that you are giving resources, whether your time or money, to a cause that is for the children of that planet. So you could work at a veterans hospital for Mars, or give money to a VA hospital.
If you have Mars in the 6th or 12th specifically, that is like what you should be doing.
Yes, exactly. And it can get more specific. Obviously, absolutely, 100%.
I'm further
and should.
Yes,
Mars can and should be.
Free tip: if you're listening to this and you have Mars in the 6th or 12th, and you want to get rid of your Mars problems, donate to a veterans hospital, because that is the perfect example for that.
Yes, absolutely. And it can be, I think, depending on like your skill level, your knowledge level, or whatever, like you can do, it will still work. It just like you can get more specific to kind of like very specifically address the problem that you're having in a really detailed way. And that's probably the most effective, but it's still going to be very effective kind of just choosing a marshal or a Saturnian or some kind of charity that has, But it also can be time. It doesn't have to be money. And the key thing that I think Austin talked about that I really kind of love is like the reminder that it's in proportion to what you have to give. If you are a billionaire and you give $100 to a VA hospital, that will do absolute nothing. Nothing for you. because that's like literally like you could wipe your ass with $100 bill if you're a billionaire, right? But if you give $5 when you are living paycheck to paycheck, and this is like this is something that you're like, I really need this struggle to end, and you're giving that like $5 that you have to this cause to help with that. Deeply effective, very, very, very effective. So don't think that you need to give this massive amount or even massive amount of time, even if you choose time as a resource. If you don't have it, don't like sacrifice to the point of like, it being, detrimental to yourself, because that's the whole point, is to make it have a positive impact. But it has to be in proportion to what you have and what you can provide. What are your thoughts from a Vedic perspective? Because I know planetary charity is a bit more.
So I mean, that is
that practice.
I mean, so my first remediation for my fucked Venus was through planetary charity, because Venus does have a very strong like wealth signification. I mean, in the Western too, like Venus is your things kind of. But Shukra is like very material, and so I was like, oh, I'll donate money, obviously, because like my thought was Saturn.
Sure.
Saturn probably wants you to donate your time. It's Saturn. Venus probably wants my money, if I'm being honest. Like, that's probably what she wants. It's my fucking money. So I have Venus with Mars aspected by Saturn and Rahu. So she is getting it from every malefic.
Every time I think about that, I'm like, oh, honey.
I know.
It's so hard.
And then you're like, your Venus talisman broke the second you put it on. Yeah,
literally the second. Yeah. And then you forgot it when you were going on your trip to Norway. Yeah. She did not want you. No.
She was like,
she did want you.
She was like, you better work, bitch. Literally, that's what she did.
Free Britain.
But that was my first way to remediate Venus. Was I was donating. I gave like a monthly donation. This was 2 years ago. I was 3 years ago. When did I take Freedom's class? Don't know.
2 years ago.
Don't care.
Oh.
No, I think it was 3. I think it was 3. 3 years ago.
2022. It was 2 years ago. Because we went to Norway 2022 while you were taking the class.
Well, I was taking 1 or 2.
1. Because you were showing us your books. You were like truly just in it in Norway 2022.
Oh, I guess that sounds right. Yeah. Because then, so 2 years ago, for a few months before I started like engaging with Venus in a more intimate level, I was giving a monthly donation to a like charity that helps women who are survivors of domestic violence, because it's Venus in the 7th.
Perfect. Yeah.
Afflicted by Mars specifically, but also the other two malefics.
Yes.
Like,
yes. The perfect donation. Yeah.
And I was like, oh my God. And then I was like, no, I guess I can engage with Venus instead. Like it felt it. I was like, the wealth is appreciated, but it felt impersonal.
Well, that is the nature, I think, of planetary
That's the nature of
planetary
charity.
And I think sometimes it's a good way to start. If you are nervous, or if it doesn't work when you go up front and it's dangerous, and you're like, ooh, not that.
And that was I was like nervous to approach Venus because of the condition. I was like, I'm nervous that if I engage with you in the slightest, it will upset you even more, basically.
Yeah.
So I was like, let me start with this. And then I was like, okay, I think I'm getting signs that it's time to like move forward.
Mm-hmm.
And it was like, okay, now we can engage in this practice. But I truly think it was like a test of like, do you actually want to improve this or not?
Yeah. I mean, again, it's like remediation. You're bringing, I guess we're bringing it back to full circle. Is like, at some point you have to address the problem head on. You have to experience them. Right. I mean, I still have never started a Saturn practice. And I've done, as you know,
exactly what I'm going to recommend also. So I'm not even going to say it. But that's my recommendation.
the recommendation that you literally always. But I mean, also in that case, I have Saturn with Rahu, so of course K2 would be the best to go to help remediate Saturn. Duh. I know your suggestion. Thank you very much. But even in I've done a lot. I've done a lot of remediative and devotional practice. Like, I mean, heavy. There were periods of times where I gave so much money, time, energy to so many different stars. Every single day I had 2 devotional practices, at least 2 different devotional practices. Sometimes I was like, okay, and then I have to do that ritual in the middle of the day too. And for years I did that. I'm currently in a place that I do a lot fewer devotional practices directly, because there's a number of reasons for that, but largely because I wasn't in a stable housing place for a while, so it's a whole lot harder to do those devotional practices. But some of it has to do with my personal figuring out with the planet and with the god what is necessary to do when, because not always is all the time the moment to do it. But it is in the beginning, I will say this, in the beginning, consistency and giving of your time is the most important part of devotional practices. It does not matter if the condition, I mean, it almost doesn't matter what the condition of the planet is. I would say it's just showing up.
Almost asterisk. Always is fine.
It's it just, when you're in the beginning of doing these practices. So if you're thinking about, hey, I need to remediate, or I need to go to this planet, or I need to figure out what's going, start off with planetary charity. If it's somewhat, I think especially if it's a malefic, start there if you're nervous about it, because it is true. Sometimes the malefics can come at you and you're like, well, that was a threat. Didn't really think that was necessary, but I guess truly, fully a threat. And I think, so I can understand it starting there, but there will be a point at which you start to need to give more of your time, give more of yourself, and kind of go deeper in.
And I mean, at the end of the day, you are relationship building.
Yes,
and
thank you for saying that. Thank you for saying that.
You have to build the foundation.
Yes.
To foster the relationship, and that's that's the hardest part.
Yes. Giving of the money and time via charity is helpful to have them trust you and to be oh, you could be a friend, because you're a friend to my children. Because our value, and it's the idea our values are similar, right?
I am trying to support this thing. Oh, you are also trying to support this thing. We can connect about our mutual support of this group of people, or this or whatever it is, right?
Yes. Mm-hmm. This cause.
And much like there's human relationships, there are certain things that people say or do that immediately prove to you that you do not see the
We're
world
not going
the
to
same
align.
way.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
And it's the same, but it's on a different plane.
And I think too, I mean, to that point, it's also okay to be like, I'm just not meant to engage with that planet. Just not meant to engage. It's totally not, it's totally fine. Like sometimes you just, if they're not for you. And I think accepting that is also okay. But I think, you know, when you have loud difficulties, there is a certain level of like needing to address it at some point. That like comes up. But yeah, no, I think there's sometimes, you know, like when we get into these devotional practices, sometimes like, oh my God, I should be engaging with every single planet and like all the stars that kind of are relevant in my chart. And it's like, first of all, slow down. There's a lot, like that's a lot of work. And you can't half-ass the work, especially in the beginning. You really have to give your time, space and energy. But I think the other part too is like sometimes you're just not going to mesh, and that's okay. Like you don't need to do it. You can start somewhere else and figure that out and find your way back.
Well, and then this is when, in my opinion, because I think there are certain periods of your life. Maybe you agree with this, maybe you don't, and this is a good topic that maybe we can dive into if we want. There are certain periods where certain planets are going to be more approachable and accessible. less accessible, like very clearly. Like for me personally, I have never been able to like properly engage with any form of the sun until very recently.
Interesting.
Like within the last I'm in my sun ruled year right now, and it wasn't until that year really began that I was able to access a form of the sun that resonated with me.
Timing the start of your devotional or remediatory practices to perfection years. Do it, mama. Do it. It helps so much because you have access to them in a way that you didn't before, right? There's a reason why I started my Mars practice exactly. I basically went from doing like beginning my Venus practice during my Venus ruled year, moved into a Mars ruled year, and started my Mars practice. Like it was so, and like, yes, the solar return chart was also like really strong, had an exalted Mars with the moon applying to Mars, like, and it was angular in the solar return, like loud, mama. So like, yes, I had access to that. And I also would say, let's check our solar return chart for when that perfection is happening, because I have absolutely noticed the years when Mars in my solar return was in detriment, a little bit. Like even if I was in a Mars moment, Mars was harder to access and wasn't as nice, even though we are very close. And I was like, whoa, mama. I mean, now we're at a different place because I have a very strong relationship with him. But like before, I could tell like the exalted Mars year, perfection year, incredible. Like easy, effortless, so perfect, so good, so amazing. Next year, I was also in a Mars ruled year, based on Spectlight, and and Mars was in detriment, and it was a lot harder. It was a lot more difficult. It required more from me, which usually that's true with regard to seeing a detrimental planet, like the planet will require. So like if you have a detrimental planet in your chart, that God will ask for a lot, mama. So what's best too is timing it not only to perfection year. If you don't know that technique, or you don't know, like if that's not something you need the help now. So we can't wait 5 years till you get that year. Definitely starting when the planet is in dignity. So it's like it's happiest and most resourced and most willing to probably help you, even if the planet in your chart is doing poorly.
Right.
So yeah, timing it to perfection year, love it. And really going in that perfection year for that planet, a really great idea. And then timing it to like that start to being when that planet is doing well in the sky, transit wise.
Yeah. I started my last year in my lunar perfection. Was when I started engaging with Artemis. Not even intentionally, it just happened. And then I was like,
how did it happen, John?
It was the prophecy. It was you, obviously, duh.
Yeah.
But like that one wasn't even intentional. It just happened, like.
No, it genuinely just happened. That was the most. Are you talking about the Norwalk experience? Or was there another?
Well, that was like a pivotal moment in it, but no, it was before that. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I mean, we had this like really, like a group of us had a really, really, really powerful Artemis experience where we all, like, it was just like I could tell as a person who had been engaging with Artemis for a long time. I like had a feeling. I was like, before I went to Norway, I was like, I think it was 2023. It was last year, right? Not like this past year, but the year. Yeah. I was like, she wants us to like
do something.
Talk to her as a group. Oh yeah, I was living with you, duh, girl. We were living together and we were talking about it, and I was like, I think she wants us to do something, especially because, yeah, no, I can't mention that part because we did magic. But yeah,
because we did
magic. But yeah, no, it was like there. She was like, you need to tell your friends, and it was. I mean, can we mention? Are you fine with me mentioning like just like the bare bones of what happened? Yeah. Okay, so essentially, we did this ritual with our friends. We got together. It was building up the whole week, and I couldn't figure out when was the right date. And then, really, what happened was it was like the last night we were there, and or that we were all together. I think it was moon night. Oh no, it was moon night. No. It was the end of the weekend. Anyway, it was the Memorial Day weekend, and it was the end of it, of that period that we were all there together. And we did this ritual where we all went outside. And again, none of this was like planned. It was just like an idea intuitively. And then I was like, hey, I think we should. And then people were like, okay, let's do it. Let's just like see what happens. And anyway, so went outside. The moon was so big and right in front of us. And I was like, oh shit. Did not know that was going to be true, right? Like did not know, but she was right there.
Mommy literally said,
no, like it was a very big confirmation of like, this is the moment to do it. We go outside, the moon is right there. One of our friends recites she recites the Orphic hymn. And the energy was just like immaculate because what started happening while she finished the Orphic hymn was dogs started barking. We had not heard any dogs the entire weekend.
The middle of the night. It was like probably 12:30.
Yeah. And dogs were barking out of nowhere that, again, we had never heard before. And they were like howling at the moon. And we were like, I mean, it was so emotional. It was so beautiful. The things that came up between us, like all of us, it was just like so lovely. And it's now our like Norwalk tradition is to do an art event. I mean, we did it this year as well. And it's just like, and we're going to continue doing it. And it just is like this beautiful thing. And I think, I don't know. Yeah. Those experiences, while they can happen, you can, work to make them happen kind of anytime. There's something about the right moment at the right, like timing doesn't always need to be perfect, but there's something to like something aligning and coming together and it just being like, no, this was the moment. There was no other, and so I think, and I've noticed too with timing and elections, with devotional practices and like, whether it's planetary day, planetary hour, or getting, like the actual, like detailed election right, that seems to also be an offering for like part of the devotional practice is like giving your time and energy to knowing when the right moment is. And absolutely. Like knowing when you can access them. And I will say, like, Caitlin Kopic and Austin Kopic have really shown me how important planetary hours are. I am a planetary hour truther to the end of days. It is wild the way that planetary hour moment, you can access that God so much easier than if you waited like a 45 minutes later. Like it's so much easier.
I have it like the best way I can describe it is like an astrology adjacent friend. Like she has like an interest, but is like, and like I'll tell her things and she's like, oh, that makes sense, and like wants to talk more about it. She texted me the other day and she was like, yo, why was my pump just so good at the gym? And I was like, oh, because it's Mars hour. I was like, you should just go to the gym during Mars hour. And she already had time to med and she had the planetary hour thing. I told her to download it. And she was like, oh, okay, I'll try. And like every time she does, she's like, why is this so much better? I'm like, well, because because of Mars hour. But it's like it's so clear. I mean, it's not clear, and to the untrained eye, it is not the clearest thing. But when you are someone who is intentionally like becoming aware of these things, like so clearly, like when I leave for work and it is Saturn hour, like it is like there's always traffic, there's like it is just like this little things that is just so clear
every single
time. Yeah.
And for me, and this is the thing, like, and people are like, well, do you think it's because you've like trained yourself to think that? I'm just like, no. I will literally be, and it's sometimes it's personal. Like I am exhausted, and like out of nowhere, I am so tired that I have a hard time keeping my eyes open, level tired, fatigue. And I go, oh, fuck, it's Saturn hour, isn't it? Look down at my watch because I have it on my Apple Watch.
On your watch, yeah.
Saturn hour.
Just started.
It always is. I'm like, of course. I heard this morning, out of nowhere, because there's crows that hang out in the back of where I work. I heard them caw and said, oh, must be Saturn hour. I looked at my phone, down at my watch. It was Saturn hour. They were beckoning the end of Saturn hour. And I was like, yeah, of course. I mean, of course. Like it is, yes, you could, if you were literally not paying attention, you could absolutely believe that it's just you
pure happenstance,
paying attention to the hours.
Yeah.
And that's why those things are happening. But today, Venus hour, the song, I can't remember how the lyrics go. The song that's literally like, she's got it, she's Venus, came on the beginning of Venus hour. And I was like, oh, hey girl. Like I can't, like, if you start paying attention to planetary hours, you will realize like how loud the gods are at all times. You are just literally not paying attention.
We were having a meeting outside on Thursday at work. Jupiter like middle of the day, so it's Jupiter hour. There is a red-tailed hawk on the closest tree branch to us, like cawing. Like I heard it and I literally, like, I didn't say it out loud, but I was like, it's Jupiter hour. It absolutely was. And everyone was like, what is that? And I was like, it's either a falcon or a hawk. It's one of this. Like, it's Jupiter.
Yes, Jupiter.
It's Jupiter. And we were under a canopy, so we couldn't see it. So we get out from the canopy and it's literally on the branch closest to us. And I was like, hi, sister.
I once was on Lake Washington praying to Jove and Dionysus. And it was just like an inspiration, very Jupiter, came upon me to like pray. And I was like, oh, okay. And it was like this powerful prayer of like a declaration of how I wanted my life to move forward and what I needed to create it. And I shit you not, the moment I finished the prayer, an eagle comes down off the tree, swoops down right above my head and flies over the lake. And I was like,
okay.
And of course it was Jupiter hour, right? Like, I was like, I just don't, pardon? Like it was so.
Yeah. And it always is.
It always is. And it's the most wondrous thing. And it really makes you realize like, oh shit, like, I can't imagine living life without knowing these things at all. Like I can't imagine. I don't know how I did life before.
It's the solar principle. Once it's brought to the light, it cannot be unseen.
Because it's there even if you don't want it. Like even if you literally are like, why? For me, during Saturn hour, I'm like literally talking about.
I don't want to do anything.
Period. Yeah, it's every time. Moon hour comes, I'm hungry and I'm like, oh, I feel like I need to make food. I like look at my watch. I'm like, oh, of course it's fucking moon hour. Of course, like every single time moon hour hits, hungry,
starving.
I could have just eaten, still hungry. Like it's weird. I think what it is actually like a realization of my body's needs once moon hour begins.
Yeah, which is usually hunger. Yes,
which is usually hunger because I also have like moon things, so I don't pay attention to my body all the time. So having the reminder of moon hour, when Artemis says, I am. I do have a body, and I do have to take care of it. Apparently, I I'm so much better at it than I used to be. But yeah, no, I mean, it's like a reminder. Oh, hey, I'm thirsty, or I'm hungry every time. Thirsty or I'm hungry during the hour. It's really, I mean, it's really beautiful. Really, really, really beautiful. There are times when I've noticed at work when I just needed a break, and I was like, you know what I want to do? I just want to stand in the sun. And I do it, and it feels so good. And then I'm like, oh, it's sun hour. Like I needed to witness and be witnessed by the sun.
Mm. Oh, I have an insatiable need to jerk off right now. It's Jupiter hour. Got it. Gotta go. It's true. Happens all the time.
Good night. Good night. Good night. You're absolutely right. It's so true. That's so funny. There was one time. No, I'm not going to. No. Let's just say Jupiter does will come. Definitely does.
Yeah. he be nuttin'.
But yeah. So anyway, devotional practices are really like loud and really beautiful, really amazing. What else do we want to talk about with regard to? I guess probably in specifically talking about these like Mars-Rāhu stuff. What is your recommendation for like what do you think about when you're like, okay, someone comes to you with like a really difficult Mars in this case, right? In these Mars placements, and in relation to if we were like using Simone Biles and Beyoncé as examples as our future client. And friends.
and sisters.
What would you tell and sisters? What would you tell them? How would you help them through these like difficult periods that we like kind of know have happened? Like, how would you tell them in those moments that they were having them? What to do? Obviously, they did a lot of things right. So we're not telling them that they did it wrong. They did it very right. But like, what would you? How would you help them remediate those situations?
Because it's malefics. Obviously, I don't want to go to them.
Sure.
I mean, oftentimes with Mars, I feel like when people are having Mars problems, it's like I'm doing too much, and it's like, okay, you need to relax. Like, as a very loud Mars person, sometimes you just have to fucking relax.
Yeah.
And like, so difficult for me. And engage with engage with the moon, engage with Venus, like do things that bring you joy, like, and not even necessarily like, yes, we can engage with Venus, we can do the Orphic Chem, we can also like go get a fucking drink at the bar down the street and just like
yes
allow yourself to like turn off for a second.
The best malefic experience remediation I have ever experienced, I know I just used to experience twice in that sentence, there was a period of time where I was beginning relatively in the first 6 months of my Venus practice. And there was an experience of, she asked me to like dance. And I was like, what do you mean? At that time, especially. And I was like, what do you mean? She's like, first of all, you live alone. At that time I did. You live alone. No one can see you. No one can hear you. Put your headphones on, dance to some fucking music as offering to me, basically. It was a Venus day, Venus hour. And I was like, okay. And so I did it. And like, I felt so uncomfortable. And it was weird to feel uncomfortable. I was noticing how much discomfort I had. And over the course, and so this turned into a regular thing. I did my prayers, I gave my offerings, and then I danced for her, like to some of my favorite songs. And I remember this one night when I had like this breakthrough with dancing, where I put the materia on that I had from Sphere and Sentry. Hashtag Caitlin Kopic, we love you. Put that on, burned the incense, played the music, and I danced for 2.5 hours. And I could feel the moment of like the difference between holding my arms at my side or on my body to like letting them out fully outstretched. And the difference between the beginning when I was like very restricted, to the point where like I was so free and open, and dancing like so 2.5. I was like every song was a bop. I was like, I can't stop dancing because it's so good It felt so good. I was so happy. And I danced and truly until like for 2.5 to 3 hours until I literally collapsed with joy.
Mm-hmm.
It is, I now recommend that to so many people. Yeah. And immediately when I recommend it, they're like, oh, and I'm like, I know. Do you live alone? Like, do you have your own room? Like, then you're fine. Like, close all the windows, close all the doors, put on your headphones, like move a little, do a little shuffle. That's all you got to do. And it was life-changing. I mean, like the difference between where I was then to the point of like 6 months later or three months later to when I had this moment of being like, feeling so open and free. I don't know. Honestly, it reminds me that I need to do it again because I feel like I need that like lift and to bring up the spirits. But there is something so powerful to just doing related, but like in this case, it's Venus related things that don't have to be directly magical, but Venus related things as a way to remediate the malefic things.
Yeah. And I think it's so super much powerful. Like with Venus specifically, it's so much just about like allowing yourself to feel joy. Is like so not Mars. So like to type like if we are talking about like you are having a Mars problem, okay, are you allowing yourself to feel enough joy? Like as cliche as it fucking sounds, like what are you doing for you? And just asking that question, people are like, oh, you're right. And I'm like,
I literally know. Because we are also like this. We are very malefic people who have difficult moon placements. The only difference between us in that situation is that I have like a really dignified Venus.
I was going to say the Venus is the real.
So access to certain parts of it is easier, certainly, but like it is there is that reminder of that body. And so I got a Mars talisman relatively recently, like whatever, in the past few months, and it was such a powerful experience because I got a moon talisman before I got that one. And the moon talisman was fully integrated before I got that Mars talisman. But the initiation, which I don't think every time you have an initiation for a talisman, it really depends. But I've noticed it happening for me. And it happened with this Mars talisman quite a bit. And I think it's because this Mars talisman was one I was waiting for like 2.5 years. It was like I knew it was coming. It was like a big deal to Aries that I got it. And it was like all of these omens happened that brought it into being. It was very sizable, like meaning not the size of the talisman, but it was like a big deal that it happened. So it couldn't be subtle, I guess. It's also Mars in Aries talisman. So like it's never going to be subtle regardless. But there was, the 2 weeks of the initiation, which is what it ended up being, were so, when I didn't realize it was an initiation until the end. Of course, that's like literally always how
that's how it happens.
Yes. And it was 2 weeks of like perseverance over and over. Okay, I just have to keep going. I just have to do it. I just have to get that done. I just have to go. I have to do that. I have to do that. I gotta go. Okay, gotta keep going. That talisman protected me through so many difficult things through that week. I experienced so much hardship. And I don't think it was because of the talisman. I think the talisman came at the right time. And it reflected back at me. And it was just like, it was perseverance after perseverance. But one thing I noticed or I thought of while wearing it, and this was not like with full recognition that there was an initiation going on. I wrote to friends, I said, it is super clear to me that if you're going to get a Mars talisman, you need to have a good relationship with the moon. Because if you don't, I could see how you could drive yourself into the ground. Right? And what that kind of brought up for me, especially upon the realization of it being an initiation, and therefore it being certain things happening as a result of like me recognizing what was going on magically and for myself, and with like initiations have a lot to do with a lot of things, but essentially it was like me bonding with Aries a lot more than I had before. Like it was a next level initiation to Aries for me is what it was. And so it was the realization that like, because one thing that happened was I would come home after the day and there were still things I had to do and I had to persevere through. But the moment I was done with all the things, I took moon tincture. right away. That's what it started to be, the habit that I didn't really notice I was doing, but I did. I needed to bring my body all the way down. And this isn't materia, right? This is the physical talisman. Materia is so much more physical often, and so much more, physical and embodied is what I mean to say. Because it's like, I think perhaps because it's physically embodied,
because it is physical
in that way. Yeah, because it's literally, right? So you don't usually have these kinds of experiences with like metal or stone talismans, but I had this where like, and I've had it even now, or previously, or recently, where I will wear that talisman and take it off and still feel the running energy. And I'm like, oh, I gotta come down. And so there really is, I'm thinking about Mars remediation. This is what my long way of saying, you need the moon to help remind you that you need rest. You need to come down after doing this thing.
And like bringing in my point earlier, the moon and Mars fall in each other's signs. So there is like, there is this unfortunate, I mean, not even unfortunate, there is this need for each other, even though they don't really like it.
Yes.
Like they're not friends.
Because they're doing different things.
They're doing such
completely different things. But in order for each of them to succeed, they need each other. Which is wild. I mean, you wouldn't necessarily think of that, but that's like I have noticed, like, in helping with a difficult Mars placement, you need the moon, or else you won't be able to you will burn out you will burn out over and over and over and over and over again. And honestly, for me, that has been my life experience. A constant state of burning out every 2 years.
Every Mars cycle. Crazy.
Every crazy. Yeah. Every 2 years, every Mars cycle, every whether it was like, I don't know the exact timing of it, but it was certainly after my Mars return every time. I mean, I think usually as I got to the Mars square, when Mars went into Virgo, I would have another moment where I would burn out, at least by that time. And so and the only way it stopped happening as a constant cycle was engaging intensely and intentionally with Artemis, who specifically, the reason I have recommended to so many friends, it's because Artemis is like Selene, gorgeous, beautiful,
Gorgina,
lovely,
live,
literally mother,
queenie
literally,
mother,
quite literally queen mother, right? And her Orphic is the most glorious moon in Cancer. For Orphic, it is so beautiful.
And that's just not me.
Just not me. It is just not me. And I have and especially in the beginning of my moon practice, I had no relation to what those words were saying. I was like, what the fuck are you talking about?
Not you, maybe you as in you and I, but not the collective you. Like, you read the Selene Orphic hymn and it almost is like, it's poetic and it's gorgeous. And you're just like, I'm reading words off of a paper. Like,
I'm sure she sounds really nice.
Yeah, she's a great person. Let me hum it over like a track, but it does not connect.
It's beautiful.
It's gorgeous. Yeah, but in the way that like reading a poetic stanza is gorgeous.
Yes. And then you read Artemis's, and they call her dread guardian goddess, with benignant mind, auspicious comes to mystic rights inclined. Then you're like, yes, I need that bitch, because she gets me. And that was in the beginning of my lunar practice. That's what it was. I realized, because I have the moon in Aries ruled by Mars in the first, I realized that in order to be vulnerable, in order to rest, we needed to feel safe. And the safety came because a dread guardian goddess had my back. So I could cry. I could be vulnerable. I could cook for myself because I didn't have to be ready for attack.
I'm getting this visual of, I mean, it's definitely being enhanced by this talisman, but I'm getting this visual of like, I needed to like, I'm in the middle, I'm on some stranded island, and I'm needing this constant like vigilance of like, there's nothing scary that's gonna like come at me. Like, I need to tend to this fire or whatever. Now I have somebody else that's gonna do that for me. Like Celine is gonna like
Yes.
enjoy the beautiful like meal that I'm cooking with me
Yes.
and like stare at the water longingly together. But like,
Yep.
what if something attacks? Like we don't know where we are, girlfriend.
Yes.
Like I need like
are there predators around? Like, is there some like literally? And she's like, wait, I didn't even think of that. What do you mean?
She's like, it's pretty. And I'm like, you're
just enjoy your meal. They're like, wait, but yeah. And Artemis is like, no, I get it. I got it. Don't worry.
I will patrol the island for you. Yeah. Sit neat.
Yeah. The visualization I had when reading that Orphic hymn, and especially when I did these eclipse aftercare readings, it was like a period of like doing specifically the eclipses on the Taurus, like the nodes were shifting. Oh my God, shifting into Taurus and Scorpio. I did these readings. Yeah,
always.
So I was doing these readings, and there was a moment I remember of like doing them, and I was like describing Artemis to someone, and I was like, the visualization I get each time I read this Orphic hymn, I think I had just read it to them, and I was like, and it made them burst into tears because as Artemis is wont to provide the girlies who feel unsafe on a regular basis, the moment she is called in reading her Orphic hymn, you automatically feel safe, and you're like, oh my God. Like the tears come to a certain degree because you're like, oh my God, have I been not well this entire time? Like, oh no. Like you realize how much you had been doing just to stay neutral. But the visualization I had, I named it. I was like, you know what it is? The reason I named this idea of, I think, I was naming in the moment the fact, validating the emotion this person was having. And I was like, you know what I always picture when I read this? I picture Artemis, like it's a full moon out, and she's in the woods, barefooted in like a dress, like a flowing dress with a bow and arrow, running through the woods and on patrol. That's what I picture every time I read that Orphic hymn. And I instantly feel like I can care for myself as a result. And I think, again, this is related to having Mars angular and feeling regularly unsafe and needing the moon to help me do the basic things that provide my body the ability to keep going. I have to refuel. If you're having Mars in these really prominent or really difficult placements or spaces, you need the moon to help you keep going, and also to remind you that you're safe. And that's why Artemis is like such a great, I don't know, in this moment, and we can take this out if we want to. Do you want to read the Orphic hymn too?
Yeah, I was thinking that was a good idea.
You know what I mean? We were just talking about it so much, so I feel like we should.
She came up in my entire therapy session on Monday. She was like right there, and I was like,
right there.
She was like, and I was like,
hey, what's going on?
I know. I'm sorry. I know.
One of our friends, actually, I don't know if you know. So one of our friends actually, she had been going to yours and mine, John, had been going to therapy for a while and found this new therapist.
Wait, what?
And they were really, one of our friends who was going to therapy found a new therapist and was having a really great time with this therapist. And she finally had the strength to say, or the confidence to say that she did magic, and she and the therapist goes, oh my gosh, I do magic too. My patron deity is Artemis.
Wait, I don't know who we're talking about.
And this person, I know you don't. It's fine, we'll talk about it later. But I'm saying, but that person is one of the people who engages with Artemis, like us. And then her therapist said, my patron deity is Artemis. And I was like, of course. That's so beautiful.
Yeah, it is. Of course it is. Why can I not find it?
I know it off the top of my head. Or do you want to say it?
I mean, if I can't find it, you can say it. I'm just only able. I thought it was in my faves, but it's not. It's not on my phone. That's why. Yeah, you say it.
Okay, I'm gonna bring it up just in case. I mean, I do have it memorized, but we love to have another thing. Okay. So this is the Orphic Hymn to Artemis that we both love. There's multiple translations, but this is the Thomas Taylor. Is that the one? Is that Thomas Taylor? I think is what the name is. It's the old schooly rhymey one. The other or the translation that I also really love is by Sarah Mastro's, and she has a beautiful Orphic Hymn grimoire, Orphic Hymn grimoire that is really beautiful. Highly recommend. Maybe a memoir. You never know.
Yeah. I was like, that's such an interesting way of phrasing it. Like, it totally is a memoir. Anyway.
I mean, yeah. Anyway, so, okay. Hear me, Jove's daughter, celebrated queen, Bacchian and Titan of a noble mien. In darts rejoicing in an all to shine, torch-bearing goddess Dictina divine, over births presiding in thyself a maid, to labor pangs imparting ready aid. Dissolver of the zone in wrinkled care, fierce huntress, glorying in the sylvan war. Swift in the course and dreadful arrows skilled, wandering by night, rejoicing in the field, of manly form, erect of bounteous mind, illustrious diamond nurse of humankind, immortal, earthly, bane of monsters fell, 'tis thine, blessed maid, on woody hills to dwell, foe of the stag whom woods and dogs delight, in endless youth who flourish fair and bright. O universal queen, august, divine, a various form, Sidonian power is thine. Dread guardian goddess, with benignant mind, auspicious come to mystic rites inclined, give earth a store of beauteous fruits to bear, send gentle peace and health with lovely hair, and to the mountains drive disease and care. I got emotional just now. It's so beautiful. Like, I just kept on thinking about the number of things. It's fierce huntress, glorying in the sylvan war, dreadful arrows skilled, bane of monsters fell, right? Like the bane of monsters, the foe of the stag. Like, yeah, the universal queen, august divine, this kind of like queen of swords almost kind of energy. Dread guardian goddess, all of these words that like for like malefic ruled moons or malefic afflicted moons, there really seems to be a comfort in knowing someone is strong, so that because there's a certain level of like, when you feel in danger on a regular basis, you need to in order to feel safe, you need to know someone, you need to know that there's someone who's equally as strong to be able to handle it, you know, so that you know that you don't have to be the vigilant one, that they can be the one to handle that. Yeah, I just love that Orphic Hymn so much. What are your thoughts? What came up for you?
Whenever I start thinking about Artemis, I, for some reason, always think about Princess Mononoke. I don't know if you've ever seen it.
I've always wanted to watch it. It's my like one of the Studio Ghibli movies that I haven't seen yet, but
it is my favorite one. Mm-hmm. And the Princess Mononoke figure gives like so strongly afflicted moon, like Artemisian like character, that every time I like pray to Artemis or like even just think about her, a flash of like this character comes into my brain. So yeah, that's like that's what's salient to me right now. Is just thinking about the connection between, because that movie is, it's core, it's about like environmentalism.
Right.
But like,
which many of his movies are.
Right. But it's just, she's so strongly like an Artemisian figure. And it's really beautiful.
Yeah.
And honestly, I guess one of my favorite movies is like connecting to this like greater, you know.
Yeah. Absolutely. And I think, you know, like that's one of the, if we were going to answer the question of what would you recommend to Simone Biles and Beyoncé, it truly is a relationship with an art like Artemis, or a figure like in the mythology or cosmologies that they kind of subscribe to.
A more like for
like a strong lunar character.
Neha also either quote tweeted, or I think she quote tweeted someone else talking about how like the divine feminine is like such this like whitewashed idea of just like womanhood and like like the mother is like a ferocious figure at the end of the day. Like she will do everything in her power to protect her children. And
too. Yeah.
I mean that, but like what Neha said was like, let me introduce you to Kali. And I was like,
Period.
Yeah, afflicted moons like Mars, specifically Saturn moons, like are what we're supposed to do is pray to Kali, basically, and like worship Kali, who is a form of the mother and a form of the moon at the end of the day, but is this like wildly ferocious, empowered, like I don't give a fuck form of the moon.
Yeah.
And I think that's also something that people tend to do is like over feminize the moon. Like, yes, the moon is feminine. It rules feminine sign, exalts in feminine sign. Like the moon is watery. Yes, it's at the end of the day, it's a feminine planet, but you can't negate that there is this like wildly ferocious and like primal, untamed aspect of the moon that also needs to be like worshipped and worked with.
And who's to say femininity isn't ferocious, right? Like even like Aphrodite's myths are, she will cut a bitch, right? Like she is equally as, and she's literally like seen as the embodiment of femininity. And she, like
Regina George is a Venusian figure. She's a cunt, but she's a Venusian figure. Like,
yes. I mean, my favorite story of Aphrodite is in Metamorphosis, Ovid's Metamorphosis, where she's like, she's telling a story to Adonis, her lover. And she's like, there's this guy, he wanted to fall in love with this woman. She did not want to marry anyone. And the way she was like a princess. Well, her father was a king, so she's a princess. I mean, I don't know if that, whatever. Anyway, yes. So she did not want to get married.
Yeah.
She was the daughter of a king. Let's just say that, because I think that's the way it was phrased. That's why I didn't like the word princess in my head. Daughter of a king. And she did not want to get married. And so the way she got around that is that I will get married to anyone who could beat me in a race. And all the men came, couldn't beat her in a race. And so this man who really wanted to marry her went to Aphrodite and said, Aphrodite, my love, I really want to marry this woman. Can you help me with this race? And Aphrodite was like, oh my God, absolutely, girl. And so essentially the race happens and the daughter gets like veered off track, gets lost. And the man ends up winning the race and they get married. And it comes back to Aphrodite and Adonis, and she goes, and wouldn't you believe, he didn't say thank you or burn offerings for me. And it was at that moment that I decided to make an example of them. End of story. Nothing else. That is the end of the story. Ferocious. I mean, she said, ferocious. And what did you just say? You didn't say thank you? You didn't give me any offerings?
Where was the thank you?
Mama.
Where was the follow-up? Where was the follow-up email?
Yeah. Where was the gift bag? Where was the gift basket on the way out?
Where was the edible arrangements? I didn't receive it.
I didn't receive it. But like, and then that's the end of the story, and you're just like, what? Supposed to assume that something bad happened to them, right? And she
smited him.
She's whatever she did, right? But that's a deeply feminine figure who said, oh, well, I will threaten you. Yeah, pay up. You asked me for something and you didn't, what?
And you give me nothing.
And so, I mean, I just think that sometimes, like, I think especially for martial people, someone who is equally as seemingly capable and competent as a deity or as a form is like who we need to feel safe around, to be able to open up and not feel like we have to be vigilant, which can equally be a Venusian character, right? For many people, I know people who are super martial who engage with Inanna as their Venusian figure, who is deeply martial, also seen like as a goddess of war, while also being the goddess of marriage. Because gods have multitudes, people have multitudes, and so gods have multitudes. I don't know. So I think in that way, like, but going to Inanna also allows you the space to be in relationship just as much as it allows you to be in these experiences of standing up for yourself and being in conflict. Being in relationship seems to be the opposite, but in fact, you're in relationship either way, whether it's conflict or you're engaging.
A relationship is
like loving or
at the end of the day, a relationship is mostly compromising on on what you see to be different.
Yes.
That is like a completely
inherent conflict.
It's just oh, we do not agree on this thing. Let's come to something that we both think is right or aligns with us and what we want.
Yeah,
it's not just like the Disney love story and like they fall in love and like that like
and everything it was happily
and they had 7 children and they died together and you're like, okay, like for real? Are we really thinking like trying to tell this story right now? You're like, that sounds lovely to me.
Actually, I'm like,
like I want
the Notebook
that.
when they died together in each other's arms. Like that's what I want.
Never seen my cursed Venus ass does not want to watch the fucking Notebook. I hate rom-coms. I hate romantic.
See, that's
movies.
where we differ. Rom-coms are my fucking
other than
favorite.
If they're Christmas rom-coms, sign me up.
Christmas rom-coms are a particular brand. You're absolutely right.
Yeah, that's for me.
Is it because it's kitsch, like it's camp? You're like, oh, this is funny. Like this is you don't have to
like Lindsay Lohan's
one
Christmas
thing
movie.
For you. Oh, so good.
At the end, like one of the best Christmas movies that's ever been written is Lindsay Lohan.
Is it for you a feeling of like lack of realistic?
Yeah, that's not real, but it's not real.
Therefore, like trying to believe in it feels hard because it's like, well, it couldn't possibly happen. I mean, it could.
You're like, it could. No, it does. I mean, like
you're saying perhaps potentially even, if you feel it couldn't happen for you because of the difficulty of like the difficult placements you have too. Like, right. Yeah. Like you may not have access to that story even at all, which again, I guess goes back to remediation, right? Like Selene, that prayer, if we had beautiful, dignified moons, that prayer probably would hit. We'd probably be like,
if I never experienced a mentee B in my life. Yeah, absolutely. I'd be like, Celine, what's good, girly pop? But that's just not my lived experience.
Yeah.
In the same way that
that
like,
makes sense.
Yeah, I've had wildly difficult partnerships. I'm in a fantastic one right now. Yes, but like, have experienced like very difficult partnerships. So there was like harsh truths that came to the light that are like, this is how the world works basically. And so seeing movies like The Notebook or like, I can't even think of another rom-com.
Pride and Prejudice.
Yeah, sure. I'm like, that will actually never. Also, like due to my personality, like that is just not something that is desirable to me. Mars and the 7th, a little conflict is fun.
Yes.
But like,
you actually might like Pride and Prejudice then, but anyway.
But like, at the end of the day, this like we are gonna like be happy and never argue and like be together for 60 years and never have a qualm. Is like, that's just not, that actually sounds awful to me.
I have a few rom-coms for you. I know which ones you would like. I'll make a list. Don't worry. We should put it. I'll put it out. Rom-coms for people with
rom-coms for people with cursed Venus. Yeah.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. And I because the funny thing is, I watch certain rom-coms and I go, that could absolutely happen to me. That could be me.
The only one that I've ever felt that way was Pretty Woman.
Of course.
I was like, that's so
right.
I was like, that's
for your Vedic placement specifically. I was like, that's real life. That actually happened. They wrote someone's story down and stole it. Honestly, do they get money for that?
I was like, that's real life. That happens.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah, I'll put together. I'm gonna put together a rom-com for Chris. Like I'm literally doing this. So look, be on the lookout for that. We'll post a link to it as well.
This feels like kind of like, I was gonna say, I feel like we should start to close out.
Yeah, absolutely. If we're going to, I mean, if you're comfortable with it, John, I have that Mars mantra that I used. We can add that to the link in our show notes in like oh my god, yeah, in the show notes / on YouTube in the description as like a really good relatively universal like Mars mantra that was like really effective for me. If it works for you, it works for you. But I've had really powerful experiences with it. And yeah, I think with regard to like remediation and stuff, these are things that like John and I really love to talk about. And so if you'd like to talk more, I have Surf for the Stars readings. And John has the Deities and Davidas. Is that right? Where we can talk more about these things and get actually, and John is a really good person for prescriptions for mantras, specific mantras, very detailed mantras for you. But yeah, thank you so much for listening.
I have gotten questions by clients, so I just want to put it out there. I would never prescribe a mantra that would in any possible way provide any harm. There are mantras that if you say like a syllable wrong, it's like the end of the world.
Right.
All of the mantras I prescribe at worst will do nothing.
Yes.
Because there are some very powerful, there are mantras that I don't even do because if I fuck it up, Kali's coming for my ass. I'm like, I know that.
No, right. And then the one that I'm sharing, I believe is like very, very safe.
That one is,
Caitlin Kopic has shared it in multiple places. And it's just been super, I've shared it with multiple people. They've all kind of like shared it.
Yeah, that one I'm pretty sure it's like fail safe.
Yeah. But yeah, thank you so much for listening to this podcast and listening to the 2 parts. Thank you for giving us space to, experience the difficult transits that have been happening. We hope that things have been improving for you guys too. And we hope that this kind of discussion also helps you kind of start down the path of finding solutions for yourself. And also always, again, we are here if you need more assistance with that. As we're coming back and doing regular episodes again every 2 weeks or so, we have just a reminder, we have our Patreon that you can subscribe to, where we provide obviously links to our podcast episodes, but as well as videos that talk about the elections that we choose for putting them out and for starting the recordings and stuff like that, our discussions of that, as well as what are the other things that we talk about? We put in that
elections, and then eventually you'll be able to join us while we record live
while we record. We're just kind of getting the kinks out. We're also going to start in the next few episodes. We're going to have guests, have people join us, and we're so excited about that. We're planning that out, and we're really, really excited to have even more discussions with our friends, to talk about pop culture and to talk about transits.
We've had these 2 episodes have been very malefic, so we are now changing course. And the next, hard 180 to the benefics, at least, or to lighter topics that are not Mars and fucking Rāhu.
So if you'd like to support our podcast and the work that we do, please subscribe to our Patreon. Definitely, obviously, subscribe to our YouTube channel and follow us on Spotify. Well, I noticed that now our podcast is officially everywhere. So it's on Apple Podcasts.
It's on Apple and Amazon. I had to go in and do one final step that they made very unclear. So they're now available on YouTube and Spotify, as always, Apple, Amazon. I think there's another one,
Stitch or whatever. I think it's everywhere. From what I looked, Google. Did you mention Google?
It's not Google Podcasts. I think that's what I'm thinking of. Yes, it's Google Podcasts.
Yeah. So we're basically wherever you get your podcasts. We're now on, which is super exciting. Thank you so much for being here.
Share with us I want to hear remediation experiences from folks. So
what your
radiation and radiation.
Radiation.
Sister. Remediation and devotion. Can you tell Rahu's in the ascendant right now? Remediation and
I was literally thinking Alphard. Snake is what I was thinking. Yep.
Remediation and devotional stories, practices, etc. Let us know. Thank you, sisters.
Bye, everyone. Have a wonderful next 2 weeks. We'll see you soon. Bye.
Bye.